If someone had told me 30 years ago that I would be sitting on a hard hospital bench, clutching a ragged bag and trying not to cry, I wouldn't have believed it. I had a perfect life back then, a husband, a son, and a job I loved. But life has a way of throwing surprises, and rarely are those surprises pleasant. My name is Evelyn Ashton. I'm 67 years old, and the only thing I hate more than the smell of hospital antiseptic is my son Paxton's behavior. Oil City has always been home to me, a small, cozy town where everyone knows each other. Once upon a time, oil was actually produced here, but those days are long gone. Now it's just a name, one of many reminders of former glory. I worked as a financial auditor for almost 40 years before retiring. Numbers were always my thing, crisp, clear, predictable, not like people, especially not like my son. Paxson was born 5 years after Walter and I were married. We waited so long for a baby that when he finally arrived, Walter literally carried him in his arms. Our little king, he would say, rocking the crib. Perhaps that was our mistake. Too much love, too little discipline. When Paxson turned 12, Walter was killed in a car accident, coming home late from work, dark, raining, slippery road. It was a trivial story that turned our whole life around. I was alone with a teenage boy who had just lost his father and didn't know how to deal with the pain. I tried. God, how I tried to replace both of his parents, working overtime to make sure he had everything he needed, hiring tutors when he started falling behind in school, ignoring the principal's calls when his behavior became unbearable. I told myself it was grief, that he needed time, that things would get better. But as time went on, things didn't get better. The college I paid for by selling our family real estate, he dropped out after a semester. The job I got him through old connections, he lost it after 3 weeks. The loan on his first car was paid off by me while he wrecked his second. Mom, it's only temporary, he'd say, sitting at my kitchen table in his 30s. As soon as I get back on my feet, I'll pay it all back. I'd nod and pour him more coffee. I always nodded. Sometimes I think that if you added up all the money I'd lent Paxson over the years, you could buy a small island somewhere in the Caribbean. Then there was Camellia, his first wife, Hazel's mother, a nice girl but totally unsuitable for Paxson. She worked as a supermarket cashier and dreamed of owning her own bakery. He worked, well, when he wanted to, and dreamed of riches falling out of the sky. No wonder they only lasted 6 years together. Hazel was born a year after they were married, a tiny lump with bright red hair. No one in our family had any of those. Camellia said it came from her grandmother. I fell in love with this little girl at first sight. When Hazel turned 4, Camellia left, just packed up her things and disappeared, leaving a note. I can't do this anymore. Take care of our daughter. Paxson called me at 3 in the morning, drunk and sobbing. Hazel was sitting next to him on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide open, full of tears. I took them both to my place. Or rather, I took Hazel, and Paxson just followed her, as usual having no other choice. It's been a year. Hazel is now 5, and she is the light of my life. Smart, inquisitive, with an incredible imagination. She draws pictures of imaginary worlds and tells stories about princesses who save dragons from evil knights. She laughs at my old-fashioned jokes and helps me bake cookies on Sundays. Paxson has little involvement in her upbringing. He got a job at an advertising agency where he works when he's not lazy. It pays well, but the money slips through his fingers like water. Last week he introduced us to his new girlfriend, Trinity, a girl 15 years younger than him, with lips plumped up with silicone and a look that estimates the value of every item in my house. We're planning to get married in the spring, Paxson announced, putting his arm around her waist. Trinity works at a travel agency, and she has great connections. I nodded and offered them tea. Hazel sat next to me, squeezing my hand tightly. She doesn't like new people, especially those who talk to her like a baby. What an adorable little girl, Trinity cooed, leaning toward her. How old are you? 3? 4? I'm 5 years, 3 months, and 12 days old, Hazel replied seriously. And I'm not a baby. I'm a human being. Trinity recoiled like she'd been stung, and I struggled to hold back a smile. My girl always knows what to say. After they left, Hazel asked me, Grandma, is Daddy going to live with that aunt now? Maybe, dear. Didn't you like her? Hazel shrugged her shoulders with the earnestness of a little philosopher. She smells too strong, and she looks at me strangely, as if I were something in the store she didn't want to buy. Wisdom from the mouth of a child. Trinity did indeed look at Hazel that way, as an obstacle, an unnecessary complication in her plans for Paxson. A week after that visit, Paxson announced that he and Trinity were moving in together. He took his things, but Hazel stayed with me. It's only temporary, Mom, he said as he loaded the suitcases into his car. Just until we get settled. Then I'll pick up Hazel. I nodded, knowing that would never happen. Hazel watched her father drive away from the window of her second-floor room. When his car disappeared around the corner, she didn't shed a tear. She just turned to me and asked, Can we go to the park today? I want to feed the ducks. So we went to the park. We've done it every Saturday since then. It's our little ritual. Feed the ducks, play on the playground, buy ice cream at the kiosk by the pond. Simple joys that filled our days with light. Paxson rarely called, came even less often. Sometimes he sent money, irregularly and far less than I needed to support my child. I didn't complain. I had a good pension and savings. I could afford to take care of my granddaughter. We created our own little world, me and Hazel. I took her to daycare in the mornings, then did chores or met up with friends from our book club. After lunch, I'd pick her up and we'd spend our evenings together reading books, watching old cartoons, talking about everything. On weekends, we'd go to the Natural History Museum, the library, or just walk around town. Little adventures that made us happy. One night, Paxson called and said that he and Trinity were planning a vacation to Cancun. It's going to be some kind of pre-wedding trip, he explained, and I could almost see him nervously twiddling his thumbs like he always did when he was about to ask for money. I need a little help, Mom. Just a little bit. I'll pay it back with my next paycheck. I sighed and asked how much. The amount turned out to be not so small, but I agreed. After all, this was my son, and somewhere deep inside, I still hoped that one day he would change. 2 weeks later, Hazel and I went to the park as usual. It was a beautiful fall day, cool but sunny. The leaves on the trees were already starting to turn yellow, and Hazel was collecting the prettiest ones to make a herbarium for a school project. Grandma, look, this leaf looks like a crown, she exclaimed, picking up a particularly beautiful maple leaf. Can I be the queen of the park? Of course, Your Majesty, I replied with a playful bow. What are your orders? I command everyone to be happy and to feed the ducks only healthy food. She suddenly stopped talking, her little face contorted. Grandma, I feel sick. The next moment she fell to the ground, her body convulsing. I rushed to her, screaming for help. Some man walking his dog ran up to us and called an ambulance. The minutes of waiting seemed like an eternity. I held Hazel in my arms, whispering prayers I hadn't believed in for years. Finally, the ambulance arrived. The paramedics acted quickly and professionally. One of them asked me questions while the others attended to Hazel. Had the child had seizures before? Any chronic medical conditions? Any allergies to medications? I answered, trying to remain calm, but panic was building inside me. My little girl, my Hazel, lay on a stretcher, pale and motionless, with an oxygen mask over her face. "We're going to Oil City Memorial Hospital," the paramedic said, helping me into the ambulance. "It has the best pediatric ward in the county." I nodded, unable to utter a word, and took Hazel's small hand in mine. Her fingers were cold, and that scared me more than anything. As we raced through the city streets, sirens tearing through the air, I pulled out my phone and dialed Paxton's number. The beeps. Long, unanswered beeps. I tried again and again. Nothing. With trembling fingers, I found the number of his advertising agency in the contact list. A secretary answered the phone. "Paxton is on vacation for 2 weeks," she said after a pause. "Can I give him a message when he gets back?" "It's his mother." My voice sounded strange, as if it belonged to someone else. "His daughter has just been taken to the hospital. It's urgent. Do you have any way of contacting him?" "Oh, yeah." The secretary's a little fuzzy. "I'm afraid not. He said he wouldn't be available. Vacation, you know." I thanked her and disconnected. Sure. Cancun, pre-wedding trip. A thought flashed through my mind. He'd used the money I'd given him to fly to the resort while his daughter stayed with me. And now that she's in trouble, he's not there for her. The ambulance pulled up to the hospital. The doors swung open and the medical team rushed in, taking Hazel away. I was pushed aside and could only watch as they wheeled her down the long white hallway. "Please go to registration," the nurse said to me. "We need to do some paperwork. Are you a relative?" "I'm her grandmother," I answered, feeling the tears finally break through. "Her father is unavailable." "Are you the legal guardian?" she continued, looking at me with professional compassion. "No, but—" I hesitated. "I have power of attorney from my son in case of emergencies." That was a lie. There was no power of attorney, but I knew that without it, I might not be allowed to make decisions about Hazel's treatment. "Okay," the nurse nodded. "Let's go fill out the forms." I followed her to the front desk, mentally making a list of things I needed to do. Find Paxson. Contact my lawyer. Find out what happened to Hazel. Oh, God, please let her be okay. Please, just let her be okay. I sank into a chair in front of the front desk and began mechanically answering questions, filling out form after form. Name, date of birth, address, insurance. Routines that helped me not to think about what was going on somewhere in the back of that building with my little girl. Only when I was done with the paperwork did I allow myself to pull out my phone and dial Paxton's number again. The beeps, endless beeps, and finally voicemail. "Paxton, it's Mom. Hazel's in the hospital. Oil City Memorial Hospital. She's very sick. Please call me back as soon as possible." I disconnected and put my head in my hands. There was a long wait and the unknown ahead, and somewhere out there, on the beaches of Cancun, my son was enjoying life, unaware that his daughter was fighting for hers. White walls, the smell of antiseptic, and the quiet squeak of medical equipment. A hospital is always a hospital, no matter how many plants and brightly colored pictures are hung in the hallways. I sat in the small waiting room, clutching a plastic cup of cold coffee. It had been 3 hours since Hazel had been taken in for her checkup, and I still hadn't gotten any news. I checked my phone for the 100th time. Not one missed call, not one message from Paxson. I'd already sent him a dozen messages, each one more desperate than the last. No response. "Mrs. Ashton?" I looked up. Standing in front of me was a tall man in a white coat with a file in his hands. "Dr. Raymond, according to the name tag on his chest." "Yes, that's me." I rose to my feet, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. "How's Hazel? What's wrong with her?" "Come with me." He gestured for me to follow him. "We've run some tests. Your granddaughter has a rare neurological condition known as Reiner-Gillespie syndrome." I followed him down the hall, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Syndrome of what? I've never heard of it. It's a very rare condition, the doctor explained, opening the door to a small office. Please have a seat. I'll explain in more detail. The office was small and impersonal: a table, 3 chairs, a computer, and a cabinet of medical journals. I sat down, feeling my fingers go numb. Reiner Gillespie syndrome, Dr. Raymond sat across from me, is a rare neurological disorder characterized by recurrent seizures, progressive loss of muscle control, and in advanced cases can lead to neurological impairment. It's diagnosed in about 1 in 100,000 children. I sat there stunned, trying to digest the information. Is it, treatable? There is no complete cure. The doctor looked me straight in the eye, and I appreciated his honesty. But with the right treatment, many patients lead almost normal lives. The key word is right. Treatment should be aggressive and started as early as possible. What do you need to do? My voice sounded strangely calm, even though everything inside was turning upside down. We've already started anticonvulsant therapy. He opened the folder and showed me some graphs and tables that told me nothing. But this is only the first step. It will require a comprehensive approach: specific drugs, physical therapy, perhaps experimental treatment. Experimental? I questioned, feeling a growing unease. Boston is conducting clinical trials of a new drug to treat Reiner Gillespie syndrome. The results are promising. I can contact my colleagues and see if Hazel can be included in the program. Yes, please. I nodded, trying to remain calm. In the meantime, what can we do here? We've moved Hazel to the ICU. The main thing now is to stabilize her condition. Then we'll start full treatment. Can I see her? Of course, the doctor's standing up. But I should warn you, she's hooked up to several machines. It looks scary, but everything is necessary for her treatment. He took me to the ICU. Through the glass wall, I saw Hazel, small and frail in a large hospital bed. Tubes, wires, monitors. She seemed lost among all the machinery. Her red hair contrasted sharply with the white of the pillow. Oh, God, I whispered, pressing my palm against the glass. She's under sedation now, Dr. Raymond said quietly, to prevent further seizures. You can come in, but please don't touch the equipment. I nodded and walked slowly into the room. The smell in here was even stronger: disinfection, medication, and something else, indefinable but unmistakably hospital. I carefully sat down on the chair next to the bed and took Hazel's hand, careful not to touch the IV. Hello, my little queen, I whispered, swallowing back tears. Grandma's here. Everything's gonna be okay. I didn't know if she could hear me, but I needed to say those words out loud. For her, for myself. The nurse came in and checked her vitals. She's stable, she told me with a reassuring smile. Strong girl. Yeah, I squeezed Hazel's little hand. She'd always been strong. I sat by her bedside for hours, talking to her, telling her stories, promising that soon we would go back to feeding the ducks and picking leaves. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, changing IVs. Dr. Raymond returned toward evening. I've contacted my colleagues in Boston, he reported. They are willing to consider Hazel for inclusion in the program, but there are nuances. First, we'll need to move her there as soon as she's stable enough for transportation. Second, the treatment is expensive, and not everything is covered by insurance. How much? I asked, mentally calculating my savings. About $150,000. I felt out of breath. I didn't have that kind of money, not even close. Yeah, I stammered. I'll find the money. How soon do we need to be in Boston? The sooner the better. I'd say within the week. Okay, I nodded, trying to gather my thoughts. I'll get everything organized. When the doctor left, I pulled out my phone and dialed Paxson's number again. Voicemail. I left another message, trying to speak clearly and calmly. Paxson, It's Mom again. Hazel has Reiner Gillespie syndrome. It's a rare neurological condition. She needs special treatment in Boston. It costs about $150,000. Please call me back immediately. Then I opened the banking app on my phone. After Walter's death, I had become very careful with money. I had several accounts: a current account for everyday expenses, a savings account for emergencies, and a separate account I'd opened right after Hazel was born. This account was my secret. I deposited a small amount into it each month, planning to use the money for Hazel's education, college, maybe even graduate school. I wanted her to have all the opportunities Paxson didn't have. There was about $70,000 in that account now. Not enough for treatment, but a good start. There was another account shared with Paxson. I'd opened it when he dropped out of college, hoping to teach him financial responsibility. The plan didn't work, but the account remained. I didn't use it much, but sometimes Paxson would ask me to wire money for emergencies, like a trip to Cancun. I checked the balance on the account and froze. Instead of the expected $15,000 I'd transferred for his pre-wedding trip, there was less than $100 left. Even though I'd put an additional $30,000 in there just a week ago, Paxson and I had agreed to set up a fund for Hazel's unexpected medical expenses after she'd been diagnosed with a food allergy. $45,000. It's gone. I opened the transaction history, feeling a cold rage building inside. Cash withdrawal, $10,000. Transfer to the Sunny Travel account, $20,000. Purchase at the Golden Lagoon Jewelry Store, $15,000. All the transactions are dated last week. He didn't just take the vacation money. He took everything, including Hazel's vacation money, to buy a trip to Cancun and apparently jewelry for his Trinity. I felt my hands shaking, not from grief, not from despair, from pure, undiluted rage. All these years I'd forgiven him everything, blamed it on the loss of his father, his youth, his difficult circumstances. But this was too much. The monitor next to me beeped quietly, and I instantly turned my attention to Hazel. Her condition hadn't changed. She was still sleeping peacefully under the influence of the medication. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Now was not the time for anger. Now was the time for action. I opened Instagram, an app I downloaded just to follow Paxson's rare posts about Hazel. I found his profile and saw new photos posted just 3 hours ago. Paxson and Trinity on the beach with cocktails in hand. Paxson and Trinity at a restaurant, smiling, tanned, happy. Captioned, "The last photo. Best vacation of my life with my future wife. Cancun love. Forever together." While his daughter was in the ICU, he was enjoying a beach vacation with money meant for her treatment. I closed the app, feeling nauseous. A nurse peeked into the room. "Mrs. Ashton, you need to rest. Hazel will be asleep for a few more hours. Why don't you go home, take a shower, get some sleep?" I shook my head. "I can't leave her." "At least go to the cafeteria and get something to eat," the nurse insisted. "I promise to call you if there's any change." I reluctantly agreed. Really, I needed to gather my thoughts, make a plan. I kissed Hazel on the forehead and left the room. The cafeteria was almost empty. Just a few nurses at a far table and an elderly man with crutches at the window. I grabbed a sandwich and coffee, doubting I could swallow a bite, and sat down at a table in the corner. I opened my phone and started making a list. I needed money, lots of money, and fast. I could take out a loan against the house. I could sell my stock, although that would be a significant loss given the current state of the market. I could ask my friends for help, though the thought of asking for money disgusted me. And something had to be done about Paxson. I couldn't let him keep siphoning money out of the account that was supposed to provide for Hazel's treatment. My gaze fell on a name on my contact list, Morton Walden, an old friend of mine and one of the best lawyers in Oil City. We'd met back in college, and though our paths had diverged, I went into finance, he into law. We'd kept in touch over the years. It was Morton who helped me with legal matters after Walter died. I pressed his number without thinking about the fact that it was almost 9 o'clock at night. Evelyn? His voice sounded surprised. Is something wrong? Morton, I need your help, I said, feeling my throat constrict. Hazel's in the hospital. She has a rare disease. She needs expensive treatment in Boston. And Paxson? I stammered, not knowing how to explain my son's behavior without it sounding like a complete betrayal. Paxson what? Morton's voice turned steely. He was always perceptive. He took the money set aside for Hazel's treatment and flew off to Cancun with his new girlfriend. He's not answering calls or texts. And Hazel? She's very sick, Morton. There was a pause, and I could almost physically feel Morton choosing words to avoid expressing everything he thought about my son. I'll be at the hospital in 20 minutes, he said at last. Which room is Hazel in? ICU, room 312. But Morton, it's almost nighttime. You don't have to. 20 minutes, Evelyn, he said firmly and passed out. I leaned back in my chair, feeling oddly relieved. For the first time since Hazel had passed out in the park, I felt like I wasn't alone. I decided to take action. When Morton showed up at the hospital, I felt a rush of energy. He always had that effect. His quiet confidence and methodical nature made me believe there was a way out of any situation. We went up to Hazel's room, where we talked quietly in the corner while the nurse checked the readings on the instruments. Morton, the nurse came out. Paxson has to come back and take responsibility. And to get him to do that, I have to cut off his access to the money. Morton nodded, showing no surprise. He knew me well enough to know that if I made the decision, I'd do whatever was necessary. What sources of income does he have besides the general account? He asked, pulling out a notebook. A salary at an advertising agency, but he doesn't get much there. I know he keeps some money in a personal account, but it's no more than 3 or 4,000. All serious expenses have always been covered by the general account. Credit cards? 2. The main one was tied to the joint account. The second one had a small limit, no more than $2,000. Morton jotted down this information and tapped his pen thoughtfully on his notepad. Do you have access to the joint account? Full, I smiled weakly. I'd insisted on it when I opened the account. 30 years as a financial auditor had taught me something. Paxson has the right to use the funds, but only the owner, which is me, can change the terms of the account. Good. Morton looked satisfied. Then here's what we'll do. You're going to block his access to the joint account. I'll call the credit card company. I have connections there, and they'll help freeze his cards. Then we'll contact the hotel in Cancun. I nodded, opening the banking app on my phone. Once logged in, I went to the account management section and navigated to the access settings. A few taps and Paxson's access was suspended. The system asked for confirmation of the action, and I didn't hesitate to click Confirm. Done, I said, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. The account is blocked. Morton, meanwhile, was already on the phone, backing away from the window. I heard him mention Paxson's credit card numbers, which I had provided him, and explain the situation. His voice was calm and professional, but I knew there was a steely determination behind that calmness. Morton had always disliked Paxson, though he never said so directly out of respect for me. Finished talking, he turned back to me. The cards are blocked. Now the hotel. He dialed the number again, this time putting me on speakerphone so I could participate in the conversation. Caribbean Pearl Hotel, how may I help you? Came a pleasant female voice with a slight Spanish accent. Good evening. My name is Morton Walden. I'm an attorney. I need to speak to the manager. It's an urgent matter concerning one of your guests. There was a short pause. Then another voice, male and more formal. This is Enrique Suarez, the manager of the hotel. How may I help you? Minus Mr. Suarez, you have a guest staying with you named Paxton Ashton, Morton began. I need to contact him urgently for a family emergency. His 5-year-old daughter is in critical condition in the hospital. I understand. The manager's voice became sympathetic. But I can't give out personal information about our guests. Of course, Morton interrupted him. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to give him a message when he gets back to the hotel. I also want to warn him that his credit cards have been blocked due to fraud because he used the funds intended for his child's treatment for his personal needs. If he tries to pay with those cards or leave the hotel without paying, I recommend calling the police. There was a heavy pause on the line. Yeah, I understand. The manager finally said, I will personally relay the message to Mr. Ashton as soon as he returns. We will also make arrangements to secure payment for his lodging. Thank you. I will send an official email to the hotel's email account for confirmation. Very much appreciate your cooperation. Morton ended the call and looked at me. Now we have to wait. Judging by the time in Cancun, it's the height of the day there. He's probably at the beach or on some kind of excursion. When he tries to pay for lunch or souvenirs, he finds out the cards don't work. He'll go back to the hotel, and our message will be waiting for him there. I nodded, looking at the sleeping Hazel. Her little face seemed so peaceful in the midst of all that medical equipment. What if he just used his spare card or borrowed money from Trinity? I asked, feeling a pang of doubt. I don't think that would make much difference, Morton answered. The limit on his backup card is minimal, and from what you've told me about Trinity, she doesn't seem like the kind of person who carries a lot of cash around. Anyway, he won't be able to pay for the hotel and return tickets. He'll have to get in touch with you. I sighed, feeling a strange emptiness inside. All my life I'd protected Paxson, and now I'd backed him into a corner. But I had no choice. Hazel's life was at stake. You're doing the right thing, Evelyn, Morton said quietly, as if he'd read my mind. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions to realize the weight of them. I know. I rubbed my tired eyes. I just never thought it would come to this. We sat by Hazel's bedside, occasionally exchanging phrases, but mostly in silence. Time dragged painfully slow. Nurses came and went, checking vitals. Dr. Raymond stopped by around midnight, reporting that Hazel's condition was stable but unchanged. Around 1 a.m., my phone rang. The number was an unfamiliar one with a Mexico area code. I glanced over to Morton and hit the answer button, putting it on speakerphone. Mom? Paxton's voice sounded tense. What's going on? My cards aren't working, and the hotel manager gave me some crazy message about Hazel in the hospital. It's not a crazy message, Paxton, I replied, trying to sound calm. Hazel is in the hospital. She has a rare neurological condition. She's in the intensive care unit. I've been trying to reach you all day. What? There was a note of panic in his voice. But, how did this happen? Why did you block my cards? We're stuck here with no money. Because you took the money you had set aside for Hazel's treatment and spent it on vacations and jewelry for your girlfriend. My voice remained steady, but inside I was seething. Money that your daughter needs right now. I didn't know she was going to get sick. Paxton was outraged. It's not fair, Mom. You can't just block my cards and leave us with no money in a foreign country. Paxton, Morton intervened. This is Morton Walden. I represent your mother and Hazel. The situation is as follows. You used funds from the joint account that was set up to cover Hazel's medical expenses. That qualifies as financial fraud. In addition, your absence at the time of your daughter's critical condition could be considered neglect of parental duties. What the hell? Paxton's voice got higher with indignation. Mom, you got your lawyer on me? I'm your son. And Hazel is your daughter, I replied, feeling my throat constrict. And she needs you now more than ever. But you're not around. Let me talk to him. I heard a woman's voice in the background, and then Trinity picked up the phone. Look, Mrs. Ashton, this is ridiculous. You can't hold us here like hostages. We've had this vacation planned for months. We deserve. My granddaughter is dying, I interrupted her abruptly. And you're telling me you deserve a vacation with the money set aside for her treatment? There was silence on the line. Here's the situation, I continued, feeling strangely calm. You have two options. One, you come home immediately. Paxton takes responsibility as a father and helps organize Hazel's treatment. In this case, I will restore access to the account to pay for return tickets. And the second option? Paxton asked, less confidently. Option 2, Morton interjected. We sue you for embezzlement of funds intended for the child's treatment and have your parental rights terminated. With your history of financial irresponsibility and your current behavior, the court is likely to side with us. You can't do that. There was real fear in Paxton's voice. She's my daughter. Then act like her father, I said firmly. Go back and help her. She has Reiner Gillespie syndrome, Paxson. She needs special treatment in Boston that costs over $150,000. Insurance only covers a fraction of that. The $45,000 you took out could have made a big difference. I heard a muffled conversation on the other end of the line. Paxson and Trinity were clearly arguing. Then Paxson spoke again. Okay, we'll come back, but I need money for the tickets and to pay for the hotel. I'll wire you exactly what you need for the hotel bill and the economy tickets, I said. Not a cent more, and the money will go directly to the hotel and the airline, not you. This is humiliating, Paxson exclaimed. You're treating me like a child. Because you're acting like a child, I said tiredly. Adults don't steal money from their children for fun. Adults don't disappear when their kids are in trouble. I didn't steal, Paxson started, but I interrupted him. That's enough, Paxson. I'll contact the hotel and the airline. You should be on a plane home tomorrow. End of discussion. I disconnected without waiting for his response and put the phone on the bedside table. My hands were shaking, but there was a strange calm inside. The calm of a man who had finally made a difficult but necessary decision. You did great, Morton said, squeezing my shoulder lightly. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I nodded, looking at Hazel, who was asleep. You know, all my life I've been defending him, justified him, covered for his mistakes. I thought I was doing it out of love, but now I realize that love isn't about indulging weaknesses. Sometimes love is hardness. Morton nodded understandingly. What do we do next? He asked, pulling out a notebook. We need to arrange Hazel's transfer to Boston as soon as she's ready for transportation. We need to find a place for you to live there. And, of course, figure out funding for treatment. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. First, I need to contact the hotel and the airline to arrange for Paxton's return. Second, talk to Dr. Raymond about transporting Hazel. Third, prepare the paperwork for temporary guardianship. I no longer trust Paxton to make decisions about Hazel's treatment. I can help with the last one right now, Morton said, starting to write something in his notebook. I'll prepare an application to the court for temporary guardianship on medical grounds. In such a situation, the court usually makes a decision quickly. Thank you, I smiled gratefully at him. I don't know what I would have done without you. You'd be fine, he said confidently. You always have, Evelyn. It's just that sometimes we all need support. I called the Caribbean Pearl Hotel and arranged to pay the bill directly. Then I contacted the airline and booked 2 tickets on the next flight from Cancun to Pittsburgh, the closest major airport to Oil City, for the next day. Both times I emphasized that payment was only for the specified services and no additional charges were authorized. Morton, meanwhile, was drafting the court application, occasionally asking me clarifying questions. His methodicalness and calmness had a calming effect on me. With him, I felt that I was in control of the situation, despite all its complexities. Around 3 in the morning, Hazel moved slightly in her sleep. I was instantly by her side, holding her hand. Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. "She's waking up," said the nurse who came in, checking her vitals. "That's a good sign. Dr. Raymond said to let you know if there's any change. I'll call him." 20 minutes later, Dr. Raymond showed up, looking tired but focused. He examined Hazel, checking her reactions, studying the readings. "She's stabilizing," he reported with cautious optimism. "The meds are working. If the momentum continues, we can start planning her transfer to Boston in a couple days." "How fast do we need to get there?" I asked. "The sooner the better. I've already contacted my colleagues at the Boston Neuroscience Center. They are ready to receive Hazel as soon as she is transportable. I recommend a medical flight. It's expensive, but safest in her condition." I nodded, mentally calculating the costs. Medical flight, treatment, lodging in Boston. The sum was growing by the minute. "I'll make the arrangements," I assured the doctor. I would find the money. After Dr. Raymond left, I turned to Morton again. "I'll have to sell the stock and possibly mortgage the house. That'll bring in about 100,000, plus 70,000 from Hazel's account. But that's still not enough for a full course of treatment." "I already said I'd help," Morton reminded me. "And I know a few other people who might be able to contribute. Everyone in Oil City knows and loves you, Evelyn." "I can't ask." "You're not asking," he interrupted me gently. "I'm offering. The difference is significant." My phone rang again. Same number with a Mexican area code. "Yes, Paxson," I answered, feeling tired. "Mom?" His voice sounded strangely depressed. "I got the ticket information. We'll be home tomorrow night." "Yeah, I want you to know that I didn't realize the gravity of the situation. I thought it was just some common childhood illness. And that justifies stealing the money set aside for her treatment?" I asked coldly. "No, of course not," he stammered. "Yeah, I'll make it up to you. I promise." "Don't make promises you can't keep, Paxson," I said tiredly. "Just come home and be a father to your daughter, just for once in your life." I disconnected and looked at Morton. "Do you think he'll really change?" he asked, raising an eyebrow skeptically. "No," I shook my head. "But I don't care right now. It's Hazel that matters. If he can help with her treatment, good. If not, I'll manage without him, like I always had." Morton nodded silently, looking at me with respect. The rest of the night passed in anxious anticipation. I dozed in the chair by Hazel's bedside, waking with every beep of the instruments. Morton insisted on staying with me despite my protests. He settled on the uncomfortable couch in the corner of the room, but I knew he wasn't sleeping either. There was too much to do, too many thoughts running through his head. In the morning, Hazel finally opened her eyes. Her eyes were cloudy from the medication, but she recognized me and smiled weakly. "Grandma," she whispered so quietly I could barely hear. "I dreamed I was the queen of the park, and all the ducks bowed to me." I felt tears run down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief. "Of course they bowed, my little queen," I said, gently stroking her hand. "You are the most important person in the park." Hazel smiled again and closed her eyes, falling into sleep. But now it was just a normal sleep, not medicated sedation. Progress. I turned to Morton, who was watching us with a soft smile. "She'll make it," he said confidently. "And you will. and I'll be right here, helping you both. I nodded, feeling the determination fill me. There were many challenges ahead of me: the treatment for Hazel, the confrontation with Paxson, the financial difficulties. But now, looking at my sleeping granddaughter and knowing I had that support, I was sure we'd get through it all. The phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Raymond informing me that all the paperwork for Hazel's transfer to Boston was almost ready. I listened to him, taking notes, and at that moment came a message from Paxson. "We're at the airport. We leave in an hour. We'll be home by 8 p.m. Everything was coming into motion. The plan was starting to work. And I was ready for what would happen when Paxson and Trinity returned and faced reality and the consequences of their actions. The day dragged on endlessly. I didn't leave the hospital, only going out to the cafeteria briefly when Morton insisted I needed to eat. Hazel would wake up and go back to sleep, each time recognizing me and smiling weakly. Her condition remained stable, but the doctors warned us not to let our guard down. Reiner Gillespie syndrome is insidious in its unpredictability. By late afternoon, I received a text from Paxson. "We've landed. We'll be at the hospital in an hour." I showed the message to Morton, who had stayed with me the whole time, working remotely through his laptop. "Ready for the meeting?" he asked, looking at me carefully. "No," I answered honestly. But when had I ever been ready for anything Paxson related? Morton nodded understandingly and closed the laptop. "I'll stay if you don't mind. I think my presence might keep my emotions in check." I was grateful for the offer. Morton had a way of cooling the heated atmosphere with his mere presence, calm, judicious, but with an inner core that everyone around him could feel. Exactly an hour later, Paxson was always accurate in his rare promises. I heard familiar footsteps in the corridor. The ward door opened and he walked in, followed by Trinity. Paxson looked tired and stressed, but still tanned from his beach vacation. His blonde hair, inherited from his father, was disheveled, as if he'd run his hand through it many times. Trinity stood behind him, her perfect makeup unable to hide the displeasure in every line of her face. "Mom," Paxson nodded at me, then noticed Morton and frowned. "I didn't realize we'd have company." "Minus Mr. Walden is here as my legal representative," I answered flatly. "And as a friend of the family." Paxson snorted, but didn't pursue the subject. His gaze shifted to the bed where Hazel slept. "How is she?" he asked, and for a moment I thought I heard genuine concern in his voice. "Stable, but in serious condition." I moved away, giving him a chance to come closer. "She has a rare neurological condition, Reiner Gillespie syndrome. It requires specialized treatment in Boston." Paxson cautiously approached the bed, looking at my daughter with an expression I couldn't decipher. A mixture of fear, guilt, and impatience? "How long would it last?" "The treatment, I mean," he asked, keeping his gaze on Hazel. "At least 6 months," I answered, feeling the familiar irritation rising inside me. "But that's just the initial course. Rayner Gillespie syndrome is a chronic condition, Paxson. It's lifelong." He turned to me, a flash of panic in his eyes. "For life? But, what about everything else? My job, our wedding." "Wedding?" I couldn't hide my bitter grin. "Your daughter is fighting for her life, and you're worried about a wedding?" "Don't be so dramatic, Mrs. Ashton," Trinity interjected, stepping forward. Her high heels clacked on the linoleum of the hospital floor. "Children get sick. It's part of life, but life doesn't stop because of it." I turned to her slowly, feeling the anger boiling up inside. "This isn't a normal childhood illness." My voice was quiet, but every word rang with restrained rage. Reiner Gillespie syndrome is a rare neurological disorder that can lead to paralysis and even death if not treated properly. And yes, life really does stop when your child is in the NICU. "Look," Trinity crossed her arms across her chest. I understand that you're upset, but what you did, blocking our cards, forcing us to cut our vacation short, that's just manipulative. You've always controlled Paxson, and now you're trying to control both of us. Trinity, Morton said warningly, standing up, I suggest you watch your language. We're talking about a child in critical condition and money that was set aside specifically for her treatment but misused. It was our money, Trinity objected. Paxson had a right to use it. Technically, Morton said calmly but firmly, it was money from a joint account set aside specifically for Hazel's medical needs. Using those funds for personal expenses could be classified as embezzlement. That's enough. Paxson raised his hands. Stop talking like I'm a criminal. I didn't know Hazel would get sick. I thought that it wouldn't be needed so soon. You didn't need it so soon? I couldn't believe my ears. It was set aside for an emergency, Paxson, just in case of an emergency like this. Our conversation grew louder and louder, and I noticed Hazel stirring restlessly in her sleep. The monitor tracking her heart rate beeped more frequently. Please be quiet. I lowered my voice to a whisper. You're disturbing her. Paxson glanced at his daughter and took a step back, as if frightened by her condition. Trinity rolled her eyes defiantly, but she was silent too. Why don't we continue this conversation in the hallway? Morton suggested, gesturing toward the door. We went out, leaving the nurse to watch Hazel. The hallway was quiet, with only the occasional nurse or doctor passing by. So, Paxson began as soon as the door closed behind us. What exactly do you want from me? I'm back, I'm here, what else? I want you to take responsibility, I replied, looking him straight in the eye. Hazel needs specialized treatment that costs more than I can afford. You're her father, Paxson. You have to be a part of this, both financially and morally. I don't have that kind of money, Mom. You know that, he said. I've always been struggling to make ends meet because I spent it all on fun and gifts for my girlfriends. I couldn't help my bitterness. You're 38 years old, Paxson. It's time you learned to live within your means. Don't talk to him like that, Trinity intervened. He's not a child. Then stop acting like one, I countered. Grown men don't steal money set aside for their children's medical care to buy their girlfriend jewelry. I didn't, Paxson raised his voice. It was money in a joint account. An account set up for Hazel's medical needs, Morton reminded him. It was clearly stated in the documents you signed when you opened it. Paxson ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he always did when he felt cornered. Okay, I get it. I was wrong. But what can I do now? I can't get that money back. It's spent. You can start by taking a vacation from work and coming to Boston with us, I said. Hazel needs the support of both parents. Boston? Trinity shook her head incredulously. We can't just pick up and move to Boston. We have commitments here, jobs, plans. Paxson has a commitment to his daughter, I said firmly, and that commitment trumps everything else. It's not fair. Trinity turned to Paxson. Tell her we can't just drop everything and leave. Paxson looked confused, shifting his gaze from Trinity to me and back again. Maybe there's some kind of compromise, he suggested tentatively. Mom, you could go with Hazel, and I could visit you when I can. I felt something inside me finally break. All these years I'd hoped Paxson would grow up, take responsibility. But even now, when his daughter was fighting for her life, he was looking for the easy way out. You're not going to change, I said quietly. You'll never change. At that moment, a nurse came running out of the room. Mrs. Ashton, Hazel, she's convulsing again. I rushed into the room, Paxson and the others behind me. Hazel was writhing on the bed, her little body arched. Monitors beeped. Nurses and doctors filled the room, pushing us back against the wall. What's going on? Paxson sounded genuinely scared. An exacerbation, the doctor answered briefly, injecting something into Hazel's IV. You need to get out. Clear the room. We were pushed out into the hallway, where we watched silently through the glass wall as the medical team fought for Hazel's life. Trinity stood off to the side, clearly feeling out of place. Paxson froze with a look of horror on his face. Morton held my hand tightly, as if he was afraid I'd fall. After 20 minutes that seemed like an eternity, Dr. Raymond came out to us. "We've stabilized her," he said in a tired voice. "But this was a serious attack. We need to expedite her transfer to Boston. We don't have the equipment here to treat these cases long term." "When?" I asked, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. "Tomorrow morning, if her condition permits," the doctor replied. "I'm already organizing a medical flight, but I must warn you that it is expensive." "The money will be found," I said firmly. "Do whatever is necessary." Dr. Raymond nodded and returned to the room. I turned to Paxson, who was leaning against the wall, pale and shaken. "Now do you realize the gravity of the situation?" I asked quietly. "She could die, Paxson. Your daughter could die if she doesn't get the right treatment." "Yeah, I didn't think it was that serious," he whispered. "When you said rare disease, I pictured something like, I don't know, allergies or something." "Allergies?" I couldn't believe my ears. "You thought your daughter was in the ICU because of allergies?" "I don't know what I thought," Paxson exclaimed. "I'm not a doctor. How am I supposed to know all these medical terms?" "It's not about the terms." I could feel the anger rising inside me again. "It's that you didn't even bother to find out what was going on with your daughter before you flew off to Cancun to have fun. That's not fair," Trinity interjected. "Paxson didn't receive any reports of his daughter's illness until yesterday." "Because he ignored all my calls and messages." I turned to her. "I tried to contact him all day when Hazel went into the hospital. We had a bad reception at the beach." Trinity defended herself. "And we were busy with excursions." "Excursions?" I repeated in a lifeless voice. "Of course. What could be more important than excursions?" Morton put his hand gently on my shoulder, urging me to calm down. "This isn't the time for recriminations," he said judiciously. "We need to focus on Hazel and her treatment. Paxson?" He turned to my son. "Are you going to Boston?" Paxson glanced over to Trinity, and I already knew the answer before he opened his mouth. "Yeah, I can't just leave for 6 months," he said, not looking me in the eye. "I have a job, commitments, but I'll come when I can. And of course, I'll help financially as much as I can." "As much as you can," I echoed. "And how much would that be, Paxson? Considering your last financial contribution was, let's see, 3 months ago? $500 for new clothes for Hazel?" "You're being unfair." Paxson looked hurt. "I'm doing the best I can." "No," I shook my head. "You're doing what's convenient. It's different." At that moment, a nurse came out of the room. "Hazel's awake," she announced. "She's asking for you, Mrs. Ashton." I went immediately to the room, Paxson following me. Trinity and Morton remained in the corridor. Hazel lay on the bed, pale and exhausted, but her eyes were open. When she saw me, a faint smile lit up her face. "Grandmother," she whispered. "I'm here, my little queen." I gently took her hand, trying not to hit the IV. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," she answered, "and my head hurts. Where are we?" "At the hospital, darling. You're a little sick, but the doctors are helping you get better." Hazel nodded, then noticed Paxson standing off to the side. "Daddy?" She sounded surprised. "You're back from your trip?" "Yes, baby." Paxson awkwardly approached the bed. "As soon as I found out you were sick." Hazel smiled weakly, but her attention quickly returned to me. Grandma, are we still going on the picnic on Sunday? You promised. My heart squeezed. Sunday picnic was a tradition we'd talked about back at the park, right before she passed out. As soon as you're well, sweetheart, I promised. We'll have the best picnic ever. With strawberry shortcake? Hazel clarified, her eyes brightening slightly. The biggest strawberry shortcake you've ever seen, I assured her. Hazel smiled again and looked over at Paxson. Are you coming to the picnic too, Daddy? Paxson froze, obviously not knowing what to say. He shifted his gaze from his daughter to me and back again. Yeah, I'll try, baby, he finally said. If I can. Hazel's smile faded, and I saw a realization in her eyes that a 5-year-old shouldn't have the realization that her father's promise was worthless. It's okay if you can't, she said quietly. Grandma and I will have a good time together. Those words, spoken with such adult humility, were the last straw. I saw Paxson pull back, a fleeting look of guilt on his face, quickly replaced by relief that his daughter hadn't insisted on his presence. In that moment, I made a final decision. My son would never change. He would always look for the easy way out, always put his own desires before the needs of his child. And I could no longer let Hazel suffer for it. A nurse came into the room to check Hazel's vitals. She needs rest, she said gently. Try not to tire her out. I nodded and turned to Paxson. We need to talk, outside. We walked out into the hallway, where Trinity was tapping her foot impatiently on the floor and Morton was typing something into his phone. I've made my decision, I said, looking directly at Paxson. I'm applying for full custody of Hazel. What? Paxson looked shocked. You can't just take my daughter away from me? I can, I replied calmly, and I will. You've proven by your actions that you are incapable of putting her needs before your own. You stole the money set aside for her treatment. You ignored my calls when she was in critical condition. And even now, when she needs long-term treatment, you're looking for ways to avoid responsibility. That's absurd. Trinity intervened. You can't take away a father's rights to a child just because he doesn't jump at your behest. Not at my behest. I turned to her. At the behest of doctors who say Hazel needs long-term specialized treatment. At the behest of her condition, which could worsen at any moment. At the behest of her needs as a child who deserves stability and security. You're doing this to spite me, Paxson shook his head, always wanting to control my life, and now you found the perfect way to do it, through Hazel. I felt something inside me snap. Even now, he was only thinking about himself, about the supposed control of his life, not his daughter's well-being. Morton, I turned to my friend, get the paperwork ready. I want to apply as soon as possible. Already on it, he replied, showing the phone screen where the document was open. Given the medical circumstances, we can request an emergency review. You can't do that? Paxson raised his voice. I'm her father. I have rights. You have responsibilities, I corrected him, which you've systematically ignored, and the courts will see that. I will fight, Paxson warned me. I'm going to hire a lawyer, and I'm going to fight for my rights. With what money? Morton asked calmly. I understand your finances aren't in the best shape, and a good family lawyer is expensive. Paxson turned pale, obviously realizing the reality of the situation. You can't do this to me, Mom. His voice changed from threatening to pleading. I'm your son. And Hazel is your daughter, I said firmly. And that's why I have to protect her, even from you. At that moment, the nurse came running out of the room again, her face anxious. Doctors, quickly, she shouted. The patient is having another seizure. We all rushed to the glass wall of the room. Inside, Hazel was convulsing, her small body writhing on the bed. Doctors and nurses surrounded her, administering medications, checking vitals, giving quick commands. I pressed my hand to my mouth, holding back a scream. Morton hugged me tightly around the shoulders, keeping me from falling. Paxson froze with a look of horror on his face. Trinity turned away, unable to look. In that moment, watching the fight for my granddaughter's life, I was finally confirmed in my decision. Hazel needed stability, needed reliability, needed unconditional love. She deserved better than a father who only remembered she existed when it suited him. And I was willing to do whatever it took to give her that better, even if it meant cutting the last of my ties to my own son. The next 2 days passed like a blur. After the second seizure, Hazel's condition stabilized, but the doctors decided not to risk transporting her to Boston until she was stronger. I didn't leave the hospital, dozing in the chair by her bedside, awakening at the slightest beep of instruments or movement of her little body. Paxson showed up twice a day, in the morning before work and in the evening after. Each time he came with a guilty look on his face, which was quickly replaced by impatience when Hazel didn't wake up or was too weak to talk. Trinity no longer accompanied him. Apparently, the hospital atmosphere was too depressing for her refined nature. Morton worked with incredible efficiency. Just a day after our conversation, he obtained a court order granting temporary custody of Hazel to me on medical grounds. That meant I could make all decisions about her treatment without Paxson's consent. It's only temporary, Morton explained to me as he handed me the paperwork, but it gives us the time we need to prepare a full-fledged suit for permanent custody. He'll fight it, I said, looking through the papers. Paxson never admits his mistakes. Let him fight, Morton said calmly. We have evidence of his financial irresponsibility, parental neglect, and emotional absence from Hazel's life. The court looks at the facts, Evelyn, and the facts are on our side. That same morning, a medical team from Boston arrived. They examined Hazel, reviewed her medical history, and confirmed the diagnosis of Reiner-Gillespie syndrome, a rare neurological disorder requiring specialized treatment. We are ready to accept her into our program, said Dr. Clark, the team leader. But transportation is not possible for at least 3 days, provided her condition is stable. What about the cost? I asked, preparing myself for the answer. The full course of treatment, including transportation, stay in the clinic, and medication, is estimated at about $170,000, Dr. Clark said bluntly, without trying to soften the information. Insurance might cover some of it, but the family would bear the brunt of it. I nodded, mentally calculating the available funds. I had $70,000 in Hazel's education account. I could sell the stock and get about $50,000 more. Morton had offered his help, another $30,000, but it still wasn't enough. When the medical team left, I returned to Hazel's bedside. She was asleep, her red hair strewn across the pillow, a stark contrast to the whiteness of the hospital linens. So small, so fragile, and so strong at the same time. We'll be fine, I whispered, gently brushing a strand of hair out of her face. Grandmother will make it all right. Paxson entered the room at that moment. He looked unusually determined, which alerted me immediately. We need to talk, he said without greeting. Alone. I nodded to the nurse to keep an eye on Hazel and walked with Paxson out into the hallway. To my surprise, there was a man in a suit with a leather briefcase. This is Philip Burns, Paxson introduced him. My lawyer. Lawyer? I raised my eyebrows. Did you really decide to go down that road, Paxson? You left me no choice. He sounded resentful. You're trying to take my daughter away from me by using temporary difficulties against me. Temporary hardship? I couldn't believe my ears. Is that what you call stealing money set aside for Hazel's treatment and being absent during her critical condition? Mrs. Ashton, Attorney Burns intervened. Let's not throw around terms like theft. Mr. Ashton had legal access to a joint account, an account set up specifically for his daughter's medical needs, I clarified, which was clearly stated in the opening documents. However, Burns continued without embarrassment, that doesn't give you the right to unilaterally decide permanent custody. Mr. Ashton is willing to take full responsibility for his daughter, including financial obligations for her medical treatment. I looked at Paxson, who was studiously avoiding my gaze. Where did that responsibility come from all of a sudden? I asked. And more importantly, where is the money coming from? Yesterday you said you couldn't even afford a trip to Boston. I found a solution. Paxson finally looked at me. Trinity has agreed to postpone the wedding. We'll sell the ring I bought her in Cancun and use the money for the down payment on Hazel's treatment. Then I'll pay the rest gradually. I shook my head incredulously. 15,000 for a ring is a drop in the bucket compared to the total cost of treatment. And you think the court will believe your sudden financial responsibility after years of neglect? Mrs. Ashton, Burns intervened again. We've prepared a payment plan that— Don't bother, I interrupted him. My attorney has already obtained temporary custody of Hazel for me, and we're filing for full custody in the next few days. What? Paxson looked stunned. When did this happen? This morning. I pulled out a copy of the court order and handed it to Burns. Based on medical evidence and a history of parental neglect. The lawyer looked over the document quickly, his face impassive, but I could see his shoulders tense. It's only a temporary measure, he finally said. We can challenge it. You can try, I agreed, but keep in mind that we have documentary evidence of Paxson's financial shenanigans, evidence of his absence from Hazel's life, and medical evidence of the need for a stable environment for her treatment. Paxson looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You planned this whole thing, he said bitterly. All this time you've been preparing the ground to take Hazel away from me. No, Paxson, I shook my head. You created this situation with every irresponsible behavior, every broken promise, every missed appointment with your daughter. I just finally stopped turning a blind eye. I'm her father, he exclaimed, drawing the attention of passing nurses. You can't just erase that. Fatherhood isn't just a biological fact, I replied calmly. It's the daily work, the responsibility, the presence in a child's life, and on all of those counts you failed, Paxson. Burns put his hand on Paxson's shoulder, urging him to calm down. We'll discuss our next steps and contact your attorney, he told me. But I warn you, we're going to fight for Mr. Ashton's rights. You're free to try, I shrugged. But I suggest you first read the complete file Mr. Walden has assembled, especially the financial documents. When they left, I went back to the room. Hazel was still asleep, and Morton was sitting next to her, looking at something on his laptop. I saw Paxson with Burns, he said, keeping his eyes on the screen. How'd it go? As expected, I sank into the chair next to him. He's threatening legal action. He says he's found the money to pay for Hazel's treatment. He's going to sell the ring he bought Trinity in Cancun. Morton chuckled. 15,000 out of 170. An impressive start. He's always been good at making big promises, I sighed. But this time, I'm not going to let him get away with words. This is Hazel's life we're talking about. That's why we got temporary custody. Morton closed the laptop. It gives us the opportunity to act immediately without waiting for his decisions. By the way, I contacted the clinic in Boston and agreed on a payment schedule. They agreed to start treatment with a down payment of 50,000, and the rest can be paid gradually. That's something. I was a little relieved. With my savings and your help, we'll be able to cover that payment. And I found us a place in Boston, Morton continued. A small apartment near the clinic. The rent is reasonable, and the owner is willing to take a short-term contract. I looked at him gratefully. You think of everything. Not everything, he smiled. For example, I have no idea how to pack a 5-year-old girl's things for a 6-month stay in another city. Lulz, I can handle that, I smiled back. I'd had a lot of experience packing Hazel's suitcases for weekends with her father, which he often canceled at the last minute. Morton covered my hand with his. It's gonna be different now, Evelyn. You're not alone in this anymore. 3 days later, Hazel's condition had stabilized enough that doctors cleared her for transport. The medical plane was ready to leave, all the paperwork signed, her belongings packed. Morton took care of all the organizational matters, allowing me to focus on Hazel. An hour before we left, Paxson showed up at the hospital. He looked unusually serious, even depressed. He was holding a large teddy bear. I came to say goodbye, he said when we were alone in the hallway. Hazel was being prepared for transport. And to tell you that I won't be filing a countersuit. I looked at him in surprise. What made you change your mind? Paxson sighed, looking at the teddy bear in his hands. Your lawyer contacted Burns, showed him the documents you're going to present in court. Burns said I don't stand a chance with this evidence, and that the trial would only make me look even worse. I see. I looked at him carefully. So what now? I'll sign the full custody agreement. Paxson finally looked up at me. On the condition that you don't ask me for alimony, which I can't pay anyway, and that you let me see Hazel. I considered his offer. It was practical. The lawsuit could drag on, taking up a lot of energy and money that I needed for Hazel's treatment right now. Okay, I finally said, but there are conditions. First, you agree with me in advance on all visits. Second, no promises to Hazel that you can't fulfill. Third, if you ever miss an agreed-upon appointment without a good reason, I'll renegotiate the agreement. Paxson nodded, accepting the terms. I want you to know, he added after a pause, I do love Hazel. It's just that I'm not very good at being a father. I know you love her. My voice softened. But sometimes love isn't enough, Paxson. Kids need stability, reliability, consistency. And now that Hazel is sick, those things are more important than ever. He nodded, and in his eyes I saw something I'd never seen before. Acceptance. Acceptance of my limitations, of my mistakes, of the reality of my life. Can I say goodbye to her? He asked quietly. Of course, I pointed to the door of the room. She's waiting for transportation, but I think you have a few minutes. Paxson entered the room, where Hazel had already changed into her traveling clothes and was sitting on the bed, covered with pillows for support. Seeing her father, she smiled weakly. Hello, Daddy. Hi, Princess. He walked over to her and held out a teddy bear. I brought you a friend for your journey. Hazel accepted the toy, her eyes brightening slightly. Thank you. I'm going to call him Mr. Fluffy. That's a great name. Paxson sat down next to her on the edge of the bed. Listen, Princess, you're going to go with your grandmother to another town where you can get better. I won't be able to go with you because I have to work here, but I'll call you every day, and as soon as I can, I'll come and see you. I promise. I tensed, hearing another promise he probably wouldn't keep. But Hazel was looking at her father with a wisdom that wasn't typical for her age. It's okay, Daddy, she said calmly. I understand. You have a lot of important things to do. There was no resentment in her voice, just acceptance. The same acceptance I'd just seen in Paxson's eyes. At 5 years old, she'd already learned not to expect too much from her father, and the thought broke my heart. Paxson leaned over and kissed her forehead. You're the smartest girl in the world, you know that? I know, Hazel replied seriously. Grandma always says that. Paxson smiled, but I could see the pain in his eyes. Then it must be true. Grandma is never wrong. He gave Hazel another hug, stood up, and headed for the exit. At the door, he stopped and turned around. I love you, Princess. Don't forget that. I love you too, Daddy, Hazel replied, cradling her new teddy bear in her arms. When Paxson left the room, I followed him out into the hallway. Thank you, he said without looking at me, for taking better care of her than I ever could. She's your daughter, Paxson? I reminded him gently. She'll always be your daughter, no matter who has custody. He nodded, then suddenly hugged me quickly, awkwardly, like when I was a kid. I'm sorry I was such a disappointment, he whispered, and without waiting for an answer, he walked away quickly. I stared after him, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Something was over today. The long years of strained relationships, the resentments, the disappointments. But something had also begun. A new chapter in Hazel's and my life. A chapter without the toxic influence of the past. An hour later, we were ready to leave. Hazel sat in a special medical chair, cradling Mr. Fluffy. Morton held our bags, coordinating with the medical team. I took one last look around the room, making sure nothing was forgotten. Ready for an adventure, my little queen? I asked Hazel, leaning over to her. Ready. She nodded with all the seriousness a 5-year-old girl could muster. We're going to Boston, where they're going to help me stop falling and shaking, right? Right. I kissed her forehead. And when you get better, we're going to have the biggest picnic ever. With strawberry shortcake. And ducks? Hazel asked, her eyes lighting up. And ducks, I promised. The best ducks in all of Boston. Morton came up to us, smiling. Everyone's ready, the car's waiting. The plane leaves in 2 hours. The medical team began rolling Hazel's chair out of the room. I walked beside her, holding her hand. Morton followed us with the luggage. As we were leaving the hospital, I noticed Paxson standing by his car in the parking lot. He waved at us from afar, and Hazel waved back. I nodded at him, acknowledging his presence and saying goodbye at the same time. In the medical van, on the way to the airport, Hazel dozed off, lulled by the traffic. I sat next to her, holding her little hand in mine. Morton sat across from me, occasionally glancing at us with a soft smile. You know, he said quietly, so as not to wake Hazel, I've always admired your strength, Evelyn, but what you've done these last few days is beyond anything I've seen before. I'm just protecting my granddaughter, I replied, looking at Hazel's sleeping face. Anyone in my position would do the same. No, not anyone, Morton objected. A lot of people would have kept closing their eyes, hoping for the best, taking the path of least resistance. You chose the hard path because you knew it was the right thing for Hazel. I nodded silently, realizing he was right. Making the decision to break up with Paxson, to have full custody of Hazel, to move to another city. All of it required a strength I didn't know I had until I was in this situation. What's going to happen next? Morton asked after a pause. After Boston, I mean. I haven't decided yet, I admitted. Maybe we won't go back to Oil City. Too many memories, too much of the past. Maybe we'll start over somewhere else. Sounds like a plan, Morton smiled. And you know, I think I can help you with that. I have connections in a few cities. I could find out about good schools, neighborhoods. You don't have to do that, Morton. I looked at him gratefully. You've already done more for us than anyone. I know I don't have to. He shrugged. I want to. I saw something in his eyes that had probably always been there, but that I hadn't noticed while I was busy dealing with Paxson's problems, warmth, support, and something else I wasn't ready to name yet. Hazel moved and opened her eyes. Grandma, she called in a sleepy voice, are we in Boston yet? Not yet, honey. I adjusted the blanket around her. We're going to the airport, and from there we'll take a special plane. How's the Queen? There was a flicker of admiration in her eyes. Exactly, Morton confirmed. Like a real queen. Hazel smiled and closed her eyes again, cradling Mr. Fluffy in her arms. I looked at her, at this small, brave little man who had become the center of my universe, and felt a strange peace. There were many challenges ahead: Hazel's treatment, a new town, a new life. But now, in this moment, with my granddaughter by my side and Morton across the room, I knew we could do it. I had severed my financial and emotional ties to Paxson, put the past behind me. There was a new chapter ahead, a chapter Hazel and I would write on our own, without toxic influences, without disappointments, without broken promises. The van pulled into the airport grounds, and out the window, I could see a small medical airplane waiting for us. Our new beginning, our chance at happiness, a true happiness built on love, respect, and responsibility. We've arrived, the driver announced, stopping the van. Yes, I replied quietly, looking at the sleeping Hazel. We've arrived.